But what happens when that spouse is gone and they are paying for half of the bond? Who is going to pay for half of the bond? Because that funeral cover that you're going to get is not going to pay for half of the bond for the next 20 years. Hey guys, welcome back to another video, and thank you so much for joining me yet again. If it is your first time here, and on this channel we chat about all things related to managing your money and adulting in general. So if that sounds like your type of vibe, please check out our other content, and if you like what you see, don't hesitate, smash that subscribe button and become a member of the team. Today I am addressing the elephant in the room, or a topic that I think we need to speak about a lot more than we do currently. And I know that I usually take a very storytelling, example, fun approach, or at least I like to, or I attempt to, when it comes to discussing finances and areas in the financial space, right? But guys, today I want to talk about something that is very, very serious and very dear to my heart. And that is the importance of having life cover, particularly if you do have people that are dependent on you. And by dependent on you, I do not limit this to your children only, but I am speaking about anyone that is dependent on your financial support for their well-being, or them continuing to live the lifestyle that they currently live. So this could be a niece or a cousin or someone you adopted informally. We do that a lot in our Black community. The importance of life cover, guys, I feel like we don't speak about it enough. And what saddens me is that what we do promote quite a lot from a cultural perspective is funeral cover, which is something that is completely different, does serve its role, but is completely different from life cover. And I'm going to start this conversation by saying that personally, as just me, this is not an opinion of anyone, and neither is it financial advice to anyone. But personally, if I had to choose, I think both are important, and I do have both. But if I had to choose between spending my 200 Rand on funeral cover or spending my 200 Rand on life cover, 1001 times I would choose life cover and not have funeral cover. And I'm going to explain why. And again, everybody, each to their own. I'm just telling you why I, if I had to choose, would rather go the life cover route. Let's start at the basics, right? You can tell that I'm very passionate about this because I went straight into the other stuff before explaining. Funeral cover is insurance cover that you take for yourself in the event, or for someone else actually, in the event that you pass away, or in the event that someone else passes away. You would take funeral cover on their life, and you would have typically a lump sum of X amount paid out should they pass away. This lump sum is paid out in most cases within 48 hours, so it's quite quick, and it's paid out within 48 hours so that you can obviously use this money to pay for the funeral and all of the expenses associated with that specific day. Now, funeral cover is very common. It's very, I want to use the right words here. It's very common in the Black community. It's advocated for quite a lot in the Black community, and we speak about it quite a lot, to the point where people have a lot of funeral cover for a lot of people, including themselves, and that premium can range. I've seen it range from 800 Rand to 900 Rand to thousands of rands of funeral cover for different people. So I think we've really cemented the importance of funeral cover. Remember, I said that it is important. We've really managed to cement the importance of funeral cover in our community, but we have not even begun, in my opinion, to scratch the surface when it comes to life cover. So funeral cover, very specific to the funeral instance. The money comes out quite soon, or once you've met the requirements, obviously, but typically comes out within 2 to 3 or 4 days. It's of a specific amount. usually capped at a 100,000 rand, or rather it is capped at 100,000 rand, because it's meant for the funeral and not anything beyond that, for a very long term perspective. But obviously, if money is left over, which hardly is, you can use it for other things as well. So that's funeral cover. Another important thing to note about funeral cover is that you can purchase funeral cover very easily, and there's lots of providers for funeral cover, both the common providers that we know in the space and also the smaller ones in our communities as well provide. So there's lots and lots and lots of providers in the market for funeral cover, and lump sums range from like 2,500 rand right up until the 100,000 rand that I use. And for funeral cover, you don't get underwritten. So for most common funeral covers, if you just get a funeral cover, it's typically something that you can access very easily over the phone or via email through a transaction. And by underwritten, I mean you don't go through a medical assessment where they check your medical history, they take your blood test and all of those things. You just say, I want 50,000 rand funeral cover. They typically look at your age, and then boom, you've got a specific amount. So if I am 30 and I get a 50,000 rand funeral cover, and you are 30 and you get 50,000 rand funeral cover, we will pay more or less the same premium. Whereas because they don't look at anything else other than our age, obviously, and the amount that we want. There's no medical assessments done. So it's also quite easily accessible, which is nice, right? And that's important. So that's funeral cover. Then life cover, on the other hand, is your more long-term planning solution. It is also cover. It also pays out a lump sum or a monthly amount, depending on how you've structured it. The big difference, or one of the big differences, is the fact that life cover is meant to help the people whom are dependent on you maintain their standard of living after you are gone and for a long period beyond. In fact, if you structure life cover properly, you actually supposed to plan for that person's entire. So let me make an example. So if I have a child who's 2 years old, I would typically structure my life cover to make sure that on a monthly basis and through a lump sum, they are able to pay for their education and all of their needs from the age of 2, if something happens to me today, till the age of 25. So that's how you structure it. You structure it for the very long term, depending on your need, right? So it's not just about one day, it's about a long term, and it typically covers bigger expenses like paying off your home so your kids have a roof over their head, paying off your car if you'd like, for it not to be sold when you pass away because you owe the bank, remember? And if you don't want your home to be sold when you pass away because it belongs to the bank, you typically take life cover to pay for that home as well. And then beyond that, which really excites me, you would then take life cover to make sure that your dependents live the life that they are living now beyond you not being around to pay for that. So important, guys, because even if you don't have children and you don't have dependents and you are married, in fact, if you are married, you do have a dependent, because what we do is that we buy assets and we get into agreements knowing that our spouses have our backs in terms of expenses. But what happens when that spouse is gone and they are paying for half of the bond? Who is going to pay for half of the bond? Because that funeral cover that you're going to get is not going to pay for half of the bond for the next 20 years. You get what I mean? That is why life cover is more important. It's very different in the sense that, number one, it's not capped at 100,000 rand. You can get life cover up to 10 million rand based on your needs, right? And how you structure it. Secondly, it's not a lump sum only. You can actually make it monthly plus lump sum, only monthly, no lump sum. You can really structure it to cater for your needs. The third difference is that, obviously, other than the obvious, which is the long-term one, it is underwritten. And I feel like this is where we get scared quite a lot, because with life cover, you will go through a medical assessment where they assess, your health and the current state of your health. So they'll ask you questions like, have you been diagnosed with, a dreaded disease before? When last did you go for surgery? How often do you drink? Do you go to the gym? How old are you? Do you have people in your family who've been diagnosed with specific diseases like cancer and all of those things? So you do go through quite a rigorous medical assessment both from a questions perspective, and they actually send out a nurse to do your medicals, because that insurance company is trying to understand who it is that they are dealing with. Are they dealing with someone who has a high risk of something happening to them in the near future, either because they are extremely unhealthy, they've been diagnosed with a dreaded disease or illness, or they are into dangerous sports on a weekly basis where chances of something happening are high. So they will try and ascertain who it is that they are dealing with, and once they have determined that, they will then price your insurance premium accordingly. Remember that example where if you are 30 and you're getting 50,000 rand funeral cover, and I'm 30 and I'm getting 50,000 rand funeral cover, life insurance will not work that way. You and I will not pay the same premium, because they're going to understand our medical history and our current medical state in order to properly price that risk from an insurance perspective. But remember, that is important, guys, because the insurer wants to make sure that they understand who it is that they're dealing with. They price you accordingly, so that when they pay out, it's not like, oh my God, we made this person pay 10 rand, now we have to pay 10 million rand out, but they were actually high risk. So I don't want to go into the technicalities of how that pricing happens and all of that stuff. What's important is that you will probably be checked out by a nurse. You will have to ask medical questions, and most importantly, you have to be very honest when it comes to answering those medical questions. Because here's the thing, there's also this connotation out there, or negative connotation, that insurance companies don't pay, they don't pay money, which is interesting to me, because you could also not get a payout for funeral cover. It is possible. It's not impossible. But we worry more about the insurance companies. And it's not that insurance companies necessarily don't pay, or at least this is my opinion, having worked in the industry. I think sometimes we fail to be completely honest and transparent when it comes to answering the questions. And then obviously that creates a loophole, because if an insurer asks you, how often do you do extreme sports? And you say never, you've never done them and you don't do that. And then you take insurance. And then all of a sudden something happens to you in a week's time, and then they find out that you've been registered to do extreme sports every single week. That means you are not the risk that they thought you were when they covered you or agreed to cover you, and you lied. And now something has happened, and your expectation is that the insurer must cover it, even though you weren't honest, and even though they didn't have a good sense and understanding of the risk. So it goes two ways, guys. For them to really understand what they're getting themselves into, you also need to be open and transparent, so that you can know what you're getting yourself into up front. And if there's anything that they are putting from a terms and conditions perspective, based on your responses, they can do that. You can't run away from telling the truth, because you're running away from terms and conditions, only to then complain when there's no payout that there are terms and conditions that came up. I hope that makes sense. But my point is, guys, life insurance and funeral cover are two completely different things in the ways that I've described. Life cover is important because there is life beyond the funeral. And that's why I ended by saying that if I had to choose, I would rather have a very cheap funeral that spends bare minimum, and then my family to be on my funeral for a long period of time, live the life that I desire for them to live. Because my kids going to school, a roof over my kids' head, all of that is way more important to me than being buried in a gold casket with trimmings. And that's just me, right? And I really would like to encourage us, especially where we have dependents that are dependent on us, to think about life insurance a bit differently. Consider if there is a need in your life. I always say that life insurance is not for everyone. Perhaps if something happens to you today, and nobody depends on your income, nobody depends on you earning a salary, you literally spend all of your money on yourself. And if something happens to you, you've got no one who's going to be like, oh my God, I can't go to school, I can't eat. If mom was around, if dad was around, life would be a bit different. Or if my uncle and aunt were around, life would be a bit different. Then maybe you don't need life insurance. Maybe you just need funeral cover. But if there is an instance where somebody depends on you being responsible, guys, please, 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 I don't want a member of the team who has dependents who is left uninsured at all. It is a big, big risk. It is a big risk. I'm not even going into how life insurance can actually help you create wealth, where beyond just taking care of your dependents, you now create a structure where there's an additional lump sum that goes into a trust that can use to actually build wealth beyond needs. I won't even touch on that. That's another topic for another day. But what I am saying is, if you are paying for school fees, if you are paying for groceries currently for someone else, please take a moment to just think about, if something were to happen to me today, and I know that it's a dreaded thought, but if something were to happen to me today, how is that person going to pay for this that I pay for? How is my husband going to pay for my portion of the household expenses till he dies? How are my kids going to go to school? How are my nieces and nephews, if you are supporting them, going to go to school? Please start thinking about that, and don't only think about it now. And lastly, because I can go on and on about this topic, it is affordable. It is affordable for most cases, especially when you are younger. Unless you've got a medical history or a condition that makes you high risk, then obviously that's a different story. But I can tell you, using myself as an example, the value I get out of 200 Rand from a life cover perspective is multiplied more than 5 times the value of funeral cover. What I mean by that is that, let's say, for example, with my 200 Rand, I can buy 50,000 Rand funeral cover. I can probably buy 500,000 Rand life cover. That's how affordable life cover is. But obviously, this is taken into account, just one typical random example, but it's easy for you to get a quote for yourself online from a reputable provider that you trust. You can do a quote and find out what your numbers look like. But guys, let's not just rule it out. Let's not follow what's being said out there and who didn't get paid and how. You need to be responsible for your loved ones, and you need to do right by them. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really do hope you enjoyed it and you learned something, most importantly. If you did, please give it a huge thumbs up. And if you haven't done so, subscribe and join the team so I can see you in the next one. Bye, guys.